What is storytelling? Well, in this workshop, we're looking at very much storytelling being the storytelling which you do in your experience. So we're not looking at it as a separate activity. We're looking at it as being the experience of being, of actually telling a story through your whole experience. So storytelling, as we all know, it really forges a connection between different people. So this is why it's a fundamental part in any visitor experience, because experiences are about people. It's about people's stories, their ideas, and how that excuse me and how that all connects with the local history, art, culture, and communities. So it's really key, as I say, to have storytelling intertwined into your experience. And it's a powerful tool. Because it was once the norm that we went on holiday and we would take part in different tours and activities and visited a place. But these days, more and more guests and visitors from around the world are looking for experiences that they can really engage with the people and the place on an emotional level. And that's what storytelling can really do, and that's why it's powerful. So we find more and more tourism businesses want to share their stories, but particularly they want their stories to be told by the visitors when they get home. So once someone's got home from their holiday or their trip, they want to really know and feel connected to the place that they visited on an emotional level. So they want to share on Facebook and Instagram, but also with their friends and family, which is great PR when, if you want more bookings on your experiences. So it's that emotional connection with you and your guests. And we're seeing that more and more with experiences in the UK, also around the world. So it's important to think about the power of storytelling through your experience. So can you host an experience without storytelling being involved? No, not really. Storytelling is that kind of, as I say, it's really a fundamental part of experiences, and conveying and interpreting the story really connects the guests, and it's very much around about shared experiences as well. So your experience of something that you're passing through your visitor experience onto your visitors, telling the stories of characters and people and your unique stories through your experiences is really intertwined. So a good experience will always include storytelling, and that's why we've got the workshop here this evening. So how you tell your story is really important. So the best way to do your, to actually prepare your story is actually to practice it and to find your own voice. So it's very much, this is your voice, your story. So you're not passing on a story that you've heard from somebody else. You might have bits of your story that you're passing on from different people that you've met in your life or in your particular place where you're delivering your experience. But this is very much your voice, your story. And we all have stories to tell. It's just that some of us feel that sometimes the stories that we have, we might think that our guests might not be interested in hearing about. And actually this evening, what we're going to be looking at is some real practical things and techniques you can actually do to actually think, actually, I do have all these different stories and these bits and pieces and bits of information I would like to share, and actually bring that together into one unique story that you can share with your experiences. So we all have stories to share. We all have our own life experiences, and it's how we can feed that into our own individual experiences. And let me tell you a bit more about my own experience, or my experiences. If anybody's joined these workshops before, they will know that I run experiences myself. I'm an experience maker or experience provider, and I live in Oxfordshire in the Cotswolds. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I developed my own story, my own experience, and that was making scones, baking scones, should I say, in a Cotswold cottage. So this is an experience that I run, as I say, 4 or 5 years now. It retails at £64 per person. I take 4 to 5 people on this experience, and they step inside a thatched cottage, my privately owned, my house, on the edge of the Cotswolds, and we make scones. But it's much more than just baking those scones. And as I tell you now, it's the story that I've includes these following sections. So there's our cottage. That's where it takes place, inside the cottage. Now, the cottage, we've been living there 7 years. And in that time, we have been restoring it, but we've also been looking at the history. So I've done all the ancestry going back to 1849. So I know exactly who's lived in these cottages. It's actually 2 cottages that's been knocked through, and it's got a farming and rural connection. And I've gone back to all the different families that have lived in the cottage as well. So I can share that story about all the heritage of the building and the ancestry of that building as well. So as I said, we've also restored it. We've been here 7 years. The first year, the thatch actually fell in and we had to restore the whole thatch. So I learnt loads about thatching and about how expensive it is. But I can share that story on about, the traditional art of thatching. And actually that is 2.5 meters thick from the top of the thatch right through to the ceiling, which is really heavy. Maybe one of the reasons why it actually collapsed. But it's a 15th century cottage, so it's super old. So I can share all those different stories and the different renovation work and restoration work that we've done to bring it back to life. And obviously, we're making scones, we're baking the scones, which is actually an old family recipe. So it links there back to me, about my family. It's my nan's old recipe. I put that down on a recipe card and I show my guests how to make the scones. Now, I don't pretend to be a chef or a baker. I'm a home baker and I enjoy baking. So you don't necessarily need to be an expert. Again, these are the scones that my nan used to make. I'm sharing the recipe in the cottage where I live. And that's okay. There are some experiences where you do need to be an expert. For example, if you're doing foraging or something, then it's probably wise to have a qualification in that type of field of activity. But if your experience is a bit like mine, that's absolutely fine. You can pass on your shared learning experience in your own experience. So as well as the scones, there's also an activity where we do a guided walk around the village, visiting a 13th century church. And I give all the history and heritage about the village as well. So the cottage is the setting, it's the village is the setting as well. And there's also remains of an old castle. And that castle dates back around about the 14th century as well, and it's got links back to Oliver Cromwell and James I. So some big characters there, some big history, which works really well for the international guests, especially the North Americans. They love those links to the royal family and Oliver Cromwell and all those different things as well. So I can feed that into my experience. So it's the history, the heritage, the restoration. Of course, it's the scone making. It's the links to the village and the big history, and that's very much my story, as well as enjoying the cream tea that the guests get to make themselves. So it's much more than just a cooking experience. It's that whole story.